it is Daniela Saioni, and I'm here today to talk about story consulting, why and how I train story consultants as creatives, because we are, and to answer any questions about my Story Editor Studio program. So Story Editor Studio is the program that I created to train story consultants. Story consulting is one of the things I do in life as a professional, which I love. And there were almost no training programs in the world for story consultants. There's almost nobody teaching this. And it was my lifeline all throughout this strike. I'm a Writers Guild of Canada member, and we weren't on strike, but of course I'm also a script supervisor, and I get a lot of my work through script supervising on set on American films. And of course we were not working, so I got to focus solely on teaching and story consulting. Story consulting was my lifeline. It is also my joy. Listen, it is a creative role, and sometimes people are like, what do you mean? Well, first of all, we're represented by creative unions, the Writers Guild of Canada and the Writers Guild of America, and you can also get non-union story editors. One of the things I've been doing with my first 3 cohorts is trying to recommend them for work. Anytime I can't take a gig because I can't work non-union, I will forward it to one of my non-union students. Now, the thing about story consulting, script consulting, also called story editing. It's why I called my program Story Editor Studio. It's actually my preferred title, story editor. In the union, they differentiate in the contract language. So in the contract language, especially when I work in feature film, I'm called a story consultant. But they're allowed to credit me any way I want to be credited, that the producer will credit me. And my preferred credit is story editor. I noticed that some of my European clients call it script editor, and I don't know why. That sort of, it feels different. That feels like a different job, because you can edit a script the way that script supervisors edit a script to reflect, formatting and how it was read. But a story consultant is someone actually working with the writer to shape the story, to help bring out the best in the writer that they're working with. There's a big coaching aspect to story consulting, which of course I love, because I love coaching. But there's a very creative aspect to it. And we are represented by creative unions for a few very big reasons. One of them is that we should be writers ourselves. Now, I say should because some of my best story consulting cohort, some of my best graduates of Story Editor Studio were not writers at all. But it's not that just anyone can take the program, because they can't. You have to have a qualifying call with me, because it may be too advanced for some people, and I want you guys to get the best benefit out of the program. And obviously I only train 20 people a year, so I want those 20 people to be strongly representative of the level that I expect. I aspire to have my graduates at a very high level, and they have been. I've been very lucky, because I always say, my programs aren't like the most. I don't attract the most amount of people in the world, but I have super quality people. So I've been very, very lucky with the people who find me. So thank you for finding me. If you have questions, I am going to talk about why we're a creative, and also why what I expect to see in someone applying to Story Editor Studio. We have 18 spots left now. I've accepted 2 people, and basically I can tell on a 15-minute Zoom And you can use that time or even longer to ask me questions about the program. But I thought I'll address some of the more common questions I get here. So what do I look for in what do I think makes for a great story consultant, and therefore who am I looking for in my programs? So obviously I'm looking for someone who writers will actually hire as a story consultant. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have to be a writer, but you do need to speak the language of writers. So if you're not a screenwriter, it's okay if you're still in training, but you need a substantial enough amount of training that you can speak to people who are writing feature films, who are writing television. And sometimes I take people who have heavy specialization in feature films, but they don't necessarily know the language of television yet, because obviously you're going to learn it in the program. So sometimes some of the testimonials I've gotten, thank you for those testimonials, they're awesome. People who are great writers to begin with said, oh, I really learned how to write in the Story Editor Studio program, which is nice, but I wouldn't have been training them if they didn't already know how to write to some, proficient degree. It's just that I'll give you a whole bunch more tools in that program, because one of the super creative things about being a story consultant or a story editor, script doctoring is the next level up from that. Script doctoring is when you're actually rewriting and punching up the script, which I do, and which you'll have the skills to do when you come out of that program. But it's a slightly different thing if people are saying, are you teaching me to be a script doctor? Yes, I'm giving you the skills, but story consultants actually coach writers through to get the maximum potential out of their scripts, which is different from people who work just giving coverage, just giving notes and like coverage notes for contests and stuff like that. That's not a bad thing to have in your pocket to apply to Story Editor Studio. I have had a few people who made a living giving coverage and notes or being studio readers, or that's cool. But that's not story editing. Story editing is the next level up from that, and script doctoring is the next level up from that. Some of the great backgrounds people have had, and the reason there's a difference is giving coverage makes you an analyst, but story editors are one step beyond, or a few steps beyond, an analyst, because an analyst is fantastic. They're necessary, but and I think this is actually something that makes, there's some people for example, in my writing programs who I think are brilliant story editors. I can tell they're brilliant story editors from the way that they give notes in class. I have a writer's room program where we learn to give each other constructive feedback, and I can just tell they've got all this potential as story editors, but they get nervous. They're like, I don't know enough about like analysis to do that. But there's a technical, an analytical component to story consulting, and there's a very intuitive, creative component to it, and you have to kind of have both to be a great story consultant, right? And the thing of it is, story consultants have their own voice, just like writers have their own voice, and that's why there's not going to be enough of us out in the world, right? Well, there aren't, and I don't think there ever will be, because we have to connect. We not only have to have our own voice, but it's got to be a voice that connects with the writer who is hiring you, or the producer who's hiring you. Usually it's the writer who hires me. I work one-on-one with writers, but sometimes it's a producer who hires you in conjunction with or on behalf of a writer for something that they've bought from a writer. So you kind of have to be on the same page. You have to understand the story that the creator is trying to tell. I also very often work with writer-directors, which is great because I certainly speak cinematic language. So that's a great pairing for me. Some of the other kind of creative positions who are not writers, who have done really well in Story Editor Studio, and you've seen me say this before, are picture editors. And I was thinking about why, and I was remembering my own editing professor, amazing guy who's no longer with us, but my own editing prof, I was recounting this story. I'll have to tone it down because it wasn't PG how he said it. But basically, he said to be a great picture editor, you have to serve the director, their wife, and their mistress. Like, you're constantly like making concessions for not just one person, but so many people, right? And he said you have to understand how to be a positive collaborator and still, create a good edit while getting all these notes and input from people. And that's kind of what makes a great story consultant as well. So you have to understand your client and understand how to get the best of them, how to get the best out of them, and how to get the best out of the project, and you have to have a vision for the project, just like a picture editor. So I'm not surprised that some of the non-writers who do well in Story Editor Studio are picture editors, because they're creative and collaborative. Another subset of people who do really well in Story Editor Studio, we're not necessarily seen as creative, but we have this sort of skill of collaboration, being able to visualize what a director or writer needs, are script supervisors. So I do have script supervisors who do really well in the program. Now, of course, it needs to be a script supervisor with writing experience, because not every script supervisor has writing experience. But if you're a script supervisor with writing experience, you may be an excellent candidate for the program. And it's an amazing complementary it's a good complementary job. I always tell my script supervisors, try to get a job outside the film business that's a complementary job in case the industry dies like it did this year. But this year I was actually able to survive on my story editing. So okay. But it is, we do share a lot of the same skills. By the way, feel free to ask any questions while I'm talking, because I'm here for the hour, and we have lots of time. I'm here for the hour if there are questions, and I'm sure that I'll be able to talk for an hour, because I always do. So story consultants are creative in that they need to be able to have a very solid, obviously technical understanding of writing, but sometimes I'll take people in the program who are much more intuitive. We had a filmmaker last year, a European filmmaker in the program that used to write his own films, but he didn't really have almost any formal writing training. Sometimes people think they have formal writing training because they took screenwriting courses in university, and sometimes that's enough, but then you realize, oh, they really don't. Like, it really depends on the program. It depends on what they retained from the program and all of that. But I took him into the program on the sense that he had really interesting intuitive perspective, and he really did. Like, some of his notes were very unique, very phenomenal, and so you have to account for the fact that some people are going to hire people for their intuitive perspective, and that's perfectly valid. And especially because he came from a very specific kind of cultural perspective that was, very necessary, very needed, and not seen enough in the world. All of that stuff. So when I'm casting my cohort for these programs, so I'm casting right now for January 2024. We start on the 14th, and it's 10 Sundays from the January 14th to March 17th. When I'm casting, I'm really looking for a whole mix. So you can be super technical, or you can be super intuitive, and you may still have enough to do the program. But what I see, and it's by design, is by the end of the program, you're going to be able to have both. Because if you're very, very technical, I'm going to insist that you flex your intuitive muscle, because your clients are going to respect you more for that. And if you're intuitive, I'm going to teach you more stuff to give you more technical words and analysis to help your clients, because they're also going to respect you more. You know what I mean? You need a bit of both, or a lot of both. I have a lot of both, because I'm an analysis freak. I'm equal parts left brain, right brain. I don't know if you guys have ever done those tests where, like, are you left brain? I always score right down the middle. So it's no surprise that my courses are very analytical, but also creative. I even approach the way I teach my script supervision program. I know for sure that script supervision is not a creative position, but the way that we have to support creative egos of showrunners, directors, DOPs, actors is so intense that we have to understand the creative mind, and we have to be able to speak their language. So that's why my program, the way that I teach script supervision, is like that. And it's kind of the reason my story consulting program is much the same way. I love that old phrase, buy a man a fish, feed him for a night, teach a man to fish, feed him forever. I have taken some of my personal clients that I've had as story editing clients and said, you know what, you could pay me thousands of dollars to be your story editor, or you could take my writing program. This was before I had Story Editor Studio. I would say, take my writing program, because sometimes, obviously, that's what people need first before they do Story Editor Studio, is to learn how to write, or to learn I'm not saying that I'm going to teach you how to write, because writing is so. I'll teach you one way. I'll teach you the process that has worked for me and my students. I've had some very successful students over the years, and I continue to, and I'm very grateful that they find me and that they do the work. But I literally said that to one of my clients who ended up selling a series. So I'm shooting myself in the foot as a story consultant by doing that, but I would rather that someone learns how to take care of themselves, because I'm not going to be around forever. And frankly, I have plenty of clients anyway, so I'm not hurting for work, So I don't mind saying, why don't you just learn the craft, and then you don't have to, then they'll still, by the way, they still hire me as a story consultant, because then they still need a story consultant. They still need a story editor. Some of the funding bodies require you to attach a story consultant when you're in development, especially as a newer writer. So Telefilm Canada is one of those funding bodies. CMF, I'm in Canada, so these are Canadian things. There's many kinds of, networks and studios will hire story consultants to work with their clients when they're developing a script. There's all kinds of reasons and all kinds of people who will hire you as a story consultant. I just really love it when I'm working with a writer who's very advanced. And I love working with new writers too. I've worked with plenty, and I get to work with them in my writing programs, in my regular film and TV writing programs, full of new writers or writers just like relearning, like trying to unlearn some of the bad habits that they've learned at, programs where they were, given formulas or just not taught to tap into their authentic voice, which is what I'm all about with my writing programs. But the exciting thing about Story Editor Studio is I get to work with more advanced writers, or we get to collectively work on screenplays. Okay, so here's the thing. If you're in the cohort of Story Editor Studio, you have a choice of bringing in your own script or bringing in a script of one of your clients, because I do have producers, jury members, story editors who are working already, who just want to get further training from me. So they might already have a body of clients with scripts, so they have the option of bringing that script into Story Editor Studio, and the whole cohort will work on it. If you don't know, the first 3 weeks, so the first 9 hours are training, like our peer training, and then the next 7 weeks are hands-on practicum. So it's also probably the hardest program I teach, in the sense that it's the most hands-on. So over those 7 weeks, there's going to be 14 scripts. We do 2 scripts a week. It's a lot, right? As long as if you're in the cohort, as long as you work on 10 of the 14, so you can miss up to 2 classes and still get your certification. As long as you work on at least 10 of them, then you'll get your certification. But they're all different genres. I purposefully do that because I get people who are very specialized in television, or very specialized in feature film, or like me, very specialized in comedy. Listen, as a writer and as a writing teacher, I'm very specialized in comedy. I'm a punch-up artist. Everything I do is for the love of comedy, and I have this whole theory, if you haven't seen me talk about it, about how great comedy requires great pain, and I work from trauma. It's a very specific way of working as a writing teacher in my regular writing programs. But as a story consultant, people come to me with all kinds of genres. So I do film, television, I work on treatments, I work on lookbooks and pitch decks, and I work at every stage of a... Most clients now come to me right at the earliest stage, but it can be that a client comes to me the month before they go to camera, and we're doing the very last rewrite, the very last sort of zhuzhing up of the script before they go to camera. But very often they're coming to me at a very early stage. So for the story editors I train, I want to show them different levels of work, like a range of writers, either very experienced or very new, and all the kinds of things, because we see everything. It's awesome. It's an awesome job that way. I think one of the reasons people say I took Story Editor Studio and I learned how to write is because we get to see so much in such a condensed period of time. It's like, oh wow, okay. So because you'll see people's problems and solutions. You'll see the way that people solve problems. You'll see the way other story editors solve problems in our practicum classes. You'll see how I solve the problem. You'll see how examples of written notes and examples of verbal notes. I want you guys to do both when you're in the program. Some clients will want one or the other. Obviously, most clients, we do both. You'll understand, I'll give you a very concrete framework. Now, I don't believe in rules. I believe in tools, and I believe everyone is unique and everyone has their own voice, especially also as a story consultant. And if it wasn't for that unique voice, you're not going to stand out, right? People aren't going to go, oh yeah, I think of Daniela when I think of sort of edgy intellectual comedies. I'll go to Daniela for that, or or something that is going to like hit someone in the gut, because I can write from a very emotional place too. But they're not going to come to me for science fiction. That's not my thing, right? Although people do come to me for science fiction, and then I refer them to other story editors who really do genre. Sorry, sweating. I'm not even having hot flashes anymore. I'm just warm because my heating is on. A lot of people tuning in today. Hello. So yeah, if there's any questions, ask them along the way. So over the course of those 7 weeks of practicum, you get to see a range of television, film, experienced writers, not experienced writers, how we delicately handle, because part of the creativity is how we handle the notes. Like, how do we tell someone this script is a page 1 rewrite? Like, that's a hard thing to tell a client, right? How do we say it? How constructively, what solutions can we give them constructively to take their script in another direction? How do we manage expectations? So I talk a lot about the preliminary interview and the post interview, and the work, obviously the work you do actually on the story edit. We do talk about pay in that program, because listen, even though it's a union position in Canada, and I believe it's this way in the States, because one of my story editor studio cohort in the States said he couldn't find the information on the WGA website either, that it's probably the same scenario where our wage is negotiable. That's for feature film, it's negotiable. For television, there's, and I should explain this too, in television, there is a junior position in the writer's room called story editor. Yes, they need all the same skills. Usually, though, they are learning on the job. So it's a little bit different than being a story consultant when someone is developing a television series, which is the difference. But story editor is the term that you'll see in credits on movies for someone. Basically, it's a story consultant. Someone can choose to have the title story consultant. If you're non-union, you can choose to not have a credit at all. In the union, we're supposed to get a credit. That's in our contract. And so pay can be wildly different, and pay can vary depending on whether you write or not. So some script consultants, story editors, sometimes we also write, and we're contracted to also write and rewrite. It just has to be reflected in the pay and in the credit too. It depends on the extent that you rewrite. I can rewrite as a story editor, be compensated for it, and not be credited as a writer if that's the agreement I made with the writer. But sometimes you're literally like rewriting. That's more script doctoring, and that's and some of the greatest script doctors like ever, like Carrie Fisher, like Patton Oswalt, they don't necessarily get a credit either. They get paid very handsomely, or the late Carrie Fisher got paid very handsomely, but they don't necessarily get a credit. It's up to the person, a lot of us are happy to ghostwrite as well, as long as we're somehow getting acknowledged. It's especially, obviously, when you're doing that level of story editing that involves writing, it's extremely creative. And because there's a whole spectrum of what we do in story editing, that I distinguish it from coverage altogether. I have people coming in with just coverage background who realize, oh yeah, it is a different art, because in coverage, you're behind it. You never necessarily have to talk to the client at all. Whereas in story editors and story consultants, we're talking to the client a lot. We're talking to them before and after, and sometimes during. Sometimes we're story editing with the client with us. There's different modalities that you can use, and they may change depending on the client. Part of the creativity is understanding your client and understanding what works best for them. Some of them are very visual thinkers. Some of them need everything very analytically spelled out in a lot of detail. Some of them don't, that actually will bog them down. So as you go through the practicum part of the program, the 7 weeks of practicum, you're going to learn what your favorite modalities are, what you prefer. You're going to learn to adapt to different kinds of modalities, because what I do is, if you're a writer and you want to send your script. So we did this last cohort and it worked, so I'll repeat it again. So basically, not all the cohort are going to want to, either they're not going to want to bring in a script, or they may not be a writer at all. So if they're a picture editor or a producer or a development executive, they might not want to bring a script from their client. They might not have a script to bring in to work on. So where do I get the scripts? Some of them will come from my writers in my writers programs. So I will solicit scripts from my writing program, and then some of them I will get from the general public. And I don't mean the general public. Like, there's some great screenwriting groups on Facebook, like Ink Canada is my favorite one. If you're not a member of Ink Canada and you're a screenwriter, why aren't you a member of Ink Canada? So Ink Canada Facebook edition, I think is what it's called officially. I will sometimes put out a call for scripts, and last year we did that. I had a whole bunch from my writing students, and then I had a few from Ink Canada, and it worked out really super well. So the benefit is, like, the people who submit scripts, they don't have to pay anything for the feedback, and they're getting feedback from student story editors. But just to get into that program, they have to have a certain level of proficiency in cinematic storytelling, whether they're already junior story editors, whether they're screenwriters with a lot of training or a lot of experience, whether they're picture editors, development executives. It's they're more valuable than probably what you're going to get paying for coverage somewhere, right? And also akin to what you might get working with any story editor. And for the writer, I like to bring the writer of the script that we work on in for a preliminary interview, and then ideally they would be there on the day when we give our verbal notes. My writing students have said to me, it's so hard to hear the notes from all those different people and just listening, just taking in the notes. It's really hard. I think it's a great practice for the writers in going through that to hear notes from and which, by the way, like, you don't have to necessarily implement all of them, but once a whole bunch of different, and people will give the notes in all different ways. If you saw that amazing reel of, and I say it's amazing not because I made the reel, but because the actual testimonials were so amazing. There's one by Michael Flamank, and Michael, one of my best students ever, and you can tell just by the way he wrote that testimonial. I'm like, Michael, I don't know if you're really telling people about the program, but it's just so well written. It's so clear that Michael is an exceptional writer, and the way that his perception is, but that's the way that he gave notes. He gives notes from his own unique, very, very unique voice, as we all should, right? Like, they're helpful, and they'll have you thinking in a certain way, and he's very, very thorough. It's just very, very, very thorough. He leaves no stone unturned, that guy. So yeah, everyone's going to have a different voice. I personally love seeing how it develops over the course of Story Editor Studio. So it's quite intensive, like 10 weeks to train to be a story editor, quite intensive. I don't make any false promises that this is going to be light and fluffy, or, as we used to say in the 80s when I grew up, a bird course. It's not a bird course. It's really intensive. So if you're considering it, and if you are considering it and know that you can pay in full by Monday, then definitely try to connect with me so that we can have a qualifying Zoom call before Monday. Listen, it's still fairly priced even if you don't do the early bird thing, and you might need more time to decide or to think about it anyway. In any case, be in touch to have a call with me, a Zoom with me, whatever you prefer. I'm okay as long as we talk, as long as we can talk. I don't care if it's Zoom or on the phone, and we can ask each other questions and see if this is a good fit. Sorry, this is my, a director gave me this, a director who I script supervised for on Work It. She gave me this photo of my crazy sort of notes on set. Script supervision, a very different craft from story editing, but also related in the ways that I talked about earlier. We're still serving other creative egos. The thing with story editing, it's more creative than script supervision, just because of the nature of how things have to work on set and how things have to work in the development room, in writers' rooms. We don't necessarily ever work in writers' room. We often work alone with the writer. It's different. But script supervisors, we work on set. It's more of a machine that's with very set roles. It's very different. But if we can ignite the creative imagination of a director by asking specific questions as a script supervisor, it makes us such a valuable player on the team, which is how I train my script supervisors. And with story consultants, the same thing. We have to ignite the imagination of the writer into a direction that serves them for their screenplay or TV pilot. We have to understand the big picture of what they are specifically going for. my pet peeve as a client, because I also hire story consultants and story editors, the worst thing someone can do is try to write a different movie than they're, try to get me to write a different movie. I will even complain about it if I get coverage. Like if I enter a contest and there's coverage that tries to do that, I have complained about it and been given like a new analyst, because that's ridiculous. That's not. That shouldn't be the goal of coverage. It shouldn't be the goal of story editing. Shouldn't be the goal of anyone working with a creative to make a completely different movie. You basically are trying to, you may try to talk someone into several other possibilities. Absolutely, that's called yes-anding. But you're not making a different movie. You're taking their vision, understanding their vision, and helping them execute it in a way that's going to save them rewrites. Like there's so much value added. If you've never worked with a story consultant, it's amazing. Even though I'm very proficient at it myself, I will still hire another person to do it with me. And I still haven't found my dream story consultant, by the way. I'm very picky. I'm very, very picky. But I will still nonetheless keep trying to find one. Now I think I would actually hire some of my own alumni. They're that good. They're that good. I know exactly who I would hire. They know who they are because I've told them. Sorry, had to have a sip of coffee. Are there any questions about either what story consultants do or about the program, about the timing of the early bird discount, about, so basically you'll have lifetime access to the actual training. And even when I upgrade it, like I have it all shot from last year, and because every year I've been reshooting just to make it a little bit better. And last year's was pretty solid. So I may keep it, but I may also reshoot it but like it's not that it's going to change a lot content wise. But if I do that in future years, and you were in like last year's cohort, or you're going to be in this year's cohort, you'll get all the upgrades. Okay, like that's a given. And there's documents and frameworks that you get with the program. Obviously, the main learning is in the doing, though. The main time that I see the huge trajectory in the development of the story consultant's voice and confidence and abilities, it happens during Practicum. So in fact, it happens so well. I've got 3 students from last year's cohort who said, can I audit this year? Can I audit this year and do it again? I've said yes if there's space. Like I don't always take of the full 20, by the way. If I don't find 20 people that I feel are ready to do Story Editor Studio, I won't book 20. Like last year we had 14. And I gave one of them their money back because he found it really hard to keep up. So, because he had already worked as a story editor, he forewent. We didn't do the preliminary interview, and then he found it really, really, really hard to keep up with the other 13, so I gave him his money back. But I won't take 20 if there's not 20. So I have 18 spots left. I have 3 people who want to come back and audit because they loved it so much. Okay, so if I don't take all 20, I won't take all 20, and those 3 will come back, and they're some of the people I would hire if I were to hire my own story editor. That's how much they loved it. They said it was invaluable. And I can, when we're on our call, if you're interested, I can tell you who they are if you want to reach out to them directly and ask them about why they want to audit. But if you're in the program, you'll probably meet them, because I'm guessing I won't find 20 people immediately, in the next 10 weeks who are going to fit the bill. And the people who want to take it have already reached out, but they still don't know, because, it's a lot of commitment. It is a lot of commitment. I'll give it that. But I only do it once a year because we cannot glut the market with story consultants. I know there's very few places to train, and usually it's an international cohort. So usually there's Canada, US, and sometimes the UK or Europe represented. Once we had Australia represented. I'm so, in my writing programs, I love the Australians and the New Zealanders. They're excellent writers. So I would love to see more of them in the Story Editor Studio program. So although the program happens on Sundays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. EST, if we do get a lot of Australians, and I never know until people apply, I will consider a time shift as long as it works for everybody. Sometimes people ask me, is there a way I can get compensated for my training? Yes. In the past, I have had a picture editor. You know, the Directors Guild of Canada represents picture editors in Canada, and they paid for this person's story editor studio program because she made the argument that she's constantly having to vet scripts she has to decide which films and TV shows to edit. And she also has to give the director notes along the way, and or the writer notes along the way, producer. So she wanted a language to be able to do it on their terms. And so, yeah, the Directors Guild covered tuition. I know there's different, I know for my regular writing programs, all the arts councils have given my students money to take my regular writing programs. I don't know if they necessarily give them money, but I guess they would give, if there's vocational training somewhere, that would be a thing. A lot of people say, how do you get work as a story consultant, as a story editor? One client at a time, really. That's the truth. One client at a time, which is why I like to get... I like to pair up my alumni with work whenever I can. Those early credits when you start as a story consultant. Now, listen, people come into the program with clients already, because people come into the program saying to me, I already have clients because people just trust me and they like my feedback. They say, but I don't have any formal training in this, so that's why I'm here. I want to get the formal training to be able to give my clients, you know, something actually to hang their hat on. Although I'm sure that they do, because people trust them to give them notes. Very often people don't have anything to compare us to, because then we might be the only story consultant they've ever worked with, right? So there's that. So I guess they wanted to have job security for when they did, to go, oh yeah, that person actually did a great job and knew what they were talking about. So people do come in with clients, but a lot of people don't, right? Because they're trying this skill out for the first time. So you'll develop your voice over the course of the class, and if there are spots to edit in future cohorts, you can. I am saving space for these 3 who want to come back and keep the ball. One of them, this will be her second cohort coming back, because she loves it so much. She is a story editing machine. She just loves it. She's very fast. She's very good. And she said the more she does it, the better she gets. So she just likes to keep coming back if I have room. So yeah, I'll try to make room. I don't think I'm going to book the full 20. I came close to it one second cohort. I came close to it, but I don't think I'm going to come close to booking the full 20. So I will have space for that. But you'll see, it's addictive. If you like it, you will love it. You know, and if you don't like it, you won't like it. It's very rare. I did have the one student last cohort who said this was like overwhelming. So that's why I really, really prefer that we have a qualifying call and talk about your experience, your understanding of screenwriting on a story level, on a technical level, the different sort of paradigms that you've trained under, if you've trained, or if you're more intuitive in the way you give notes, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're going to get technical skills in the program, but I don't want you to be lost. That's the key. Cannot be lost. It's not a beginner course. It's not a beginner screenwriting course. If you are here because you saw, let's say you saw one of the ads. I have some ads going on Google and Facebook. They're very specifically targeted to advanced screenwriters. So if you saw one of those ads, it's probably because you are an advanced screenwriter. That's what it's meant for. It's not a beginner program. I do have like really good programs for beginners. If you want to write television, if you want to write film. Mary, great question. Mary says, which trainings of yours do you suggest to prepare for this one? I have taken people who are graduates of my film and TV writing programs. You don't have to take both, because my film and TV writers get to intermingle. So I have a separate track for feature film screenwriting and a separate track for TV writing, and they get to intermingle at our idea jams, and they get to intermingle in writers' rooms. I used to separate out writers' rooms between TV track and film track, but over the years, like, so many of my students come back to do the other track. Like, I'm talking 80% of people who will do my TV writing program come back and do my feature film program, or vice versa. Like, it's a heavy return rate. So I have like such a high number of students who do both, but you don't necessarily have to do both, because you'll get exposed to both ways of thinking. And a lot of what I will say in one program, the difference with television is blah, blah, blah. So if you have graduated through one of those programs, especially if you've also done writer's room with me, that'll be enough training. Thank you. I create the courses that I want to see in the world, which is why you don't see a lot of my courses anywhere else. I'm so behind on Punch It Up, by the way. Punch It Up is a bonus with last year's cohort and this year's cohort, and I reshot it twice now. I'm still reshooting. I haven't reshot the whole thing. I'd shoot anyway. I'm very, I don't know what's gotten into me in terms of my perfectionism streak with my courses this year. I'm not usually, I usually leave in all the little flaws, but Punch It Up will hopefully be ready by the time I leave I'm going to the UK on December 3rd. So I hope Punch It Up will be ready by then. At least I want to get the training released before Christmas. Punch It Up is one of the only courses on the planet on how to punch up film and TV scripts to extract the maximum funny. Even if as a story editor, you're not going to specialize in comedy the way that I do, I think it's very important that you understand how comedy works. So I'm including that course as a bonus with any, when I finish it, it's coming out of me. It's such a birthing process, that course. I don't know why. I did beta test it in 2020, but then I kind of put it down, and I thought, okay, I'm going to formalize it now into a proper training program. That one is a 6-hour training program with 20 hours of practicum, and that one is, you can get Punch It Up on its own for $297 when it's released for the first time. Like, that's going to be the beta price, but it's free to anyone who does Story Editor Studio from last year's cohort and the 2024 cohort. So some people come to me with, screenwriting degrees, or they're screenwriting teachers. I love training teachers. Even in my script supervision program, I have a number of people who train film students and script supervisors. Like, I think I have at least 5 of them. And I love that. I love coaching and training teachers because, hey, like, I think, like, it has impact, it has impact. And if there's hardly anywhere to train in story editing, and you have to give notes to your writing students, I think that's a great reason to take the class. And you'll be excellent at it, no doubt, because you're used to giving a quick and effective feedback to a wide range of scripts. So that's another really good group to take the class is English professors, screenwriting professors specifically. Have I had novelists who switched over to screenwriting? I have, but they have screenwriting experience, So if you're a novelist who story edits novels, you're going to have a solid understanding of story and character. So you're actually a good candidate. But hopefully you have also taken some kind of basic screenwriting training as well. If not, I would highly recommend either my TV program or my feature film program. And listen, I know that both those programs are sold and taught through a comedy lens, because that's who I am. I'm always going to teach through a comedy lens. But 40% of my students don't write comedy at all. They write in other genres, and that is okay. The reason they come to me is they just like the process that I teach and the way that I teach. So if you are more, if you feel like you don't have enough legs in screenwriting yet, I would highly recommend one of my other programs. But feel free to reach out in my DMs or email me. I'll put the email on this after the live goes up at mondocinema@gmail.com. If you want to look at the actual story editing landing page, like where all the information is, just go up to the link tree in my bio, or it's bit.ly/story editors studio. If you want to work with a non-union story editor, there's some really good ones that I know because I've seen their work. I've seen them work in the room, in the class with writers of different levels of different genres, and they specialize. They have and I always recommend this even for directors hiring a script supervisor. I always recommend for writers hiring a story consultant, a story editor. Interview 3 people and have a conversation for at least 15 minutes, probably half an hour,
and make it a two-way interview. Let the person get to know what your goals are. And because, I've trained my story editors on how to interview and vet prospective clients for the best working experience. And also, make sure you're getting the person that you fit with, because we're all different. We're all different. There's people who don't work well with me and I don't work well with them, but there's a lot of people I work also really well with. But I want to make sure that it's a good experience on both sides. Otherwise, because it's creative. It is a creative process. And there's a lot riding on your scripts. Believe me, I've had now, I love it that in the past 18 months, I've had 4 first-time writers in my program sell their scripts, and 1 feature film first-timer, actually 2, because Keisha also got her film funded. So that's 2 feature films in the past 18 months from first-time writers. That was Keisha's first feature and first pilot. She happened to sell both. Some people have just sold television, some people just sold feature. This is phenomenal, and I'm not tooting my own horn. I think it's partly the industry is changing and embracing new writers. It's wonderful, but there's a lot riding on that script, right? So those people went through full script development with me. They went through the training, and then they went through writer's room. They went through a full slate of dedicated script development with me, and so did a lot of other people, but these are the people who really went all in and did the work and moved forward. So there is a lot riding on that. Doesn't mean you rewrite a million times. Those students didn't. Well, they rewrote, obviously, but if you rewrite, it's with intention and purpose and with clear notes. And the story consultant you hire, the coach you hire, the teacher you hire, all of the above, they're going to make a huge impact on the outcome, right? And also, how do you, as a writer, take notes? It's very important too. Like, which ones do you keep? Which ones do you reject? So going through that, if you are not interested actually in the Story Editor Studio program, but you're interested in having one of your scripts worked on by my cohort, also reach out to me. I'm interviewing all the way through until we start on January 14th. I am releasing the first lesson on January 7th for Story Editor Studio. So you have a week to digest it on the 14th. It's pre-recorded, but on the 14th I will do a live Q&A to cover the material. Each of the first 3 weeks are about 3 hours of content, of training, a little bit over 3 hours of training each week. And then the 3-hour sessions are for us to get deep into notes for the next 7 weeks. I have to schedule all the scripts. So when you join, once you're approved for the program, when you join, let me know. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, are you coming in with a script? And if so, you have until December 10th. Or some of you will join later. So you have until a few weeks before we start. So thank you so much for tuning in. Reach out to me if you want to talk in person, and see you next week for Script Supervisor Power Hour. Thank you.